While human suffering isn't new, the concept of mental trauma is pretty new. The word for trauma comes from the ancient Greek term for wound. In English, we can trace it back as far as 1656, and the Oxford English Dictionary describe it as belonging to wounds or the cure of wounds. For most of the term's history is strictly referred to physical wounds, a legacy preserved in medical phrases like blunt trauma force. The mental dimension wouldn't open up until the mid-19th century with the introduction of railways, or more specifically, railway accidents. Railway travel birthed a new world, giving us everything from synchronized time and Einstein thought relativity experiment to the unprecedented devastation of the First World War. It also, as Will Self writes, gave rise to the modern concept of trauma. Hurled across space at unprecedented speeds and confronted with a technological apparatus over which they had no control, passengers were beginning to confront the sort of unease and powerlessness that will come to mark much of modern relationship to technology. Large-scale accidents became possible. The wholesale collapse of a functioning system, as Self put it, collapse, shock, rupture, the paradigmatic element of what is now considered traumatic. In 1866, a British physician published On Railway and Other Injuries of the Nervous System. In it, he observed that people were getting into train accidents and emerging seemingly physically unscathed, only to succumb to a host of physical and psychic problems afterwards. Most histories of trauma trace its contemporary lineage to this text, in which he attributed these alignments to an unobservable shock to the spine, comparing the accidents to a blow to a magnet which disrupt its magnetic force without appearing to physically damage it. Just like a magnet, he writes, if the spine is badly jarred, shaken, or concussed by a blow, we find that the nervous force is to a certain extent shaken out of a man. Though this description of railway spine was still rooted in the nervous system, as were contemporary theories like those of neurologists who ascribe what is called traumatic neurosis to undetectable changes in the brain, it laid the groundwork for thinking of the phenomenon in terms of latent psychological effects. It wasn't until the invention of railways that the concept of chronic trauma was put into a concept. What does the railway signify? I think it's the loss of control over one's life. This is what trauma essentially means. An organism become immobilized and the energy can't leave the system. In nature, animals heal from trauma easily because there's no prefrontal cortex that prevents the healing reaction, which liberates the frozen energy from the nervous system and thus liberates the nervous system. So this could explain why perceived trauma increases with each generation. The more we become dependent on technology that takes away control over our lives, which is against our biological and human nature, against the way our nervous system naturally works. So I think the invention of the railway and the entire industrial revolution was probably the point where humans start to lose their sense of control over their lives. And this is actually what made it possible for trauma to become a widespread phenomenon. It's basically a state of helplessness because you feel like you can't do anything. The question is, why didn't people feel traumatized when falling from a horse, for example? It's probably related to the fact that you can still react when you are on a horse, so your nervous system perceives that it's still in control. For the nervous system, it's all about perception. The objective result doesn't matter. So for the last 200 years, with each generation, we have started to build a world that is not suited to our nervous system. Not only in regards to technology, also in regards to being thrown into large organizations, corporations, nations that do not resemble natural human communities. In the end, the sense of self-direction and control is reduced as a whole humans become more and more a part of a machine that's not human and greater than what they can comprehend. In response to threat and injury, animals, including humans, execute biological based non-conscious action patterns that prepare them to meet the threat and defend themselves. The very structure of trauma, including activation, disassociation, freezing, are upon based on the evolution of survival behaviors. When threatened or injured, all animals draw from a library of possible response. We orient, dodge, duck, stiffen, brace, retract, fight, flee, freeze, collapse, etc. All these coordinated responses are systematically based. They are things that the body does to protect and defend itself. It is when these oriented and defending responses are overwhelmed that we see trauma. When we are unable to complete the appropriate action, we fail to discharge the tremendous energy generated by our survival preparations. This energy becomes fixed in specific patterns of the neuromuscular readiness. The person then stays in a state of acute and then chronic arousal and dysfunction in the central nervous system. Traumatized people are not suffering from a disease in the normal sense of the word. They have been stuck in an aroused state. It is difficult, if not impossible, to function normally under these circumstances. The collective implications that are large parts of society are stuck in this state, which means energy is blocked and can't flow, which of course make it easier to control people. When the elites discovered this, they used mass dysfunction and abuse of children while telling the children that it was normal to create hyper traumatized individuals entering adulthood that would easily be prone to drug use as well as mass manipulation in order to control large sectors of society all over the world. Once you take control away from an individual with the introduction of cars, having to take transportation, it immobilizes you, individual or a populace. They become stressed, feel trapped, and lose their purpose and reason to live. At that point, they become easy to control. And then came TV, and sports, basketball, football are used to replace the loss of sense of control within an individual. Machine dependency leads to alienation from reality.